Good afternoon, wherever you are in South Africa. It's a very cold South Africa at the moment. At least the sun is shining. Welcome to Exploring the South African Hemp Opportunity, presented by Cheaper Cannabis Academy. There's a lot of buzz about hemp and the hemp industry at the moment, as licenses are supposed to be allocated from October. So we're going to unpack a whole lot of stuff. For those of you who are new to this industry, a lot of people have heard about hemp and don't necessarily understand what hemp actually is. I just want to give you a quick definition before we kick off. So hemp is a variety of cannabis sativa plant that refers to the non-psychoactive use and variants grown. And one thing was quite interesting. I found that the other day that along with bamboo, hemp is one of the fastest growing plants on the planet. So it's really good to know that it can grow so fast, and we're going to unpack all the wonderful things that hemp can actually offer to us. But I just wanted to also caveat and sort of position what's often confusing in terms of what hemp is. Hemp is cannabis. It's the application that defines it. And it's important to understand that we have recreational cannabis or adult use. We have industrial and medicinal. And the confusion often with hemp is that hemp sits across industrial and medicinal because it's used to grow CBD, especially in the States. They grow large volumes of CBD derived from hemp, and that can often be the issue that causes the confusion between the parameters between the two sort of plants or types of the cannabis plant. I'm going to bring in Philasande, who is from the Eastern Cape. Philasande, if you want to just switch your mic on and join me. Philasande is from the project coordinator for the Mbovizo Farmers Supporters Network. How are you doing, Philasande?
I'm great, thank you, Trenton. Greetings to everybody on the platform.
Yeah, great. Thanks for being here. So the reason we're starting with you is because, one of the conversations that keeps happening at the moment is how do we deal with the Eastern Cape? We have thousands of farmers there who have been growing cannabis, high THC cannabis for many, many years. And there are challenges with, there are some people who think we should convert them to hemp. What is the feeling on the ground at the moment, in terms of hemp? What is the general consensus amongst the farmer community?
Okay, so generally, cannabis is what is better understood in the Eastern Cape, as we all know cannabis in the sense of high THC and so forth. But our one in the Eastern Cape is not that high in THC volumes, actually. So it could be argued that it could may as well be the crop that is used for industrial purposes. The farmers themselves have been hearing every now and again from here and there, from perhaps radio or from an organization like ours, where we constantly going and interacting with the communities and trying to put them up to speed with what is going on within the industry. So I would say that a lot of people, upon hearing of this very versatile and wonderful hemp plant, obviously a lot of people want to jump right in. Basically, people just want to start getting involved within the industry, regardless of what it is. But for those who take a moment to think about it and say, oh, hey, so you're talking about strains that will be coming from elsewhere, and what about the cannabis that we have currently? So I would say a larger percentage of the farmers on the ground are really unhappy about ditching their own cannabis because of prohibition or legislation that's restraining them from moving ahead with it. And basically, there is a large need for something to start happening and moving away from pointing out all of the negative parts of legislation, what we can't do. People are more like, what can we do with what we have?
So it's a question of sort of, exactly, taking what you have and working with that, as opposed to just bringing in a whole new status quo. Because essentially what you're saying is that hemp licenses, will not really work in that region, because it would mean a shift from, the genetic base and the principles of what have been happening there for the last, sort of 40, 50, 60 years. What do you think the next step is? What would be the blue sky and the sort of oasis of opportunity for that region?
I think, Trenton, for a greater part of the Eastern Cape that does not have history cultivating cannabis, there's a great opportunity for hemp, as long as it's not going to interfere, it's not going to travel all the way to Bondoland and crossbreed with the local genetics. So in that light, I think that areas that are much further away from Bondoland, from the Greenbelt, have got a better advantage at working with hemp as it is, regardless of where it's sourced or whether we now start cultivating the Mbondo genetics and the KwaZulu-Natal genetics, our local genetics, South African, unless we start using that as our hemp, because I mean, what makes the differentiation between a hemp plant and a cannabis plant in terms of the content that they have? If it is that our local strains are far lower in THC than the rest of the other strains across the globe, then why is it that we cannot play around with what we have and see where it can take us as an industrial plant? So in Bondoland, we are a little bit wary of introducing strains that are from outside, and more so from outside of the continent. So my feeling and general feeling basically is that people need to be made aware of exactly what they're getting themselves into, because it's an interesting development that we can go industrially, but it needs to be well understood exactly what the implications are in terms of how our local genetics are going to be affected by an entry, for instance, of different genetics. We have been having different genetics coming in, but on the high THC levels. So the hemp space is basically one, I think, that should be engaged by government, by groups such as yourselves, organizations, and so forth. Anyone who can bring more light to what it's all about, that we are excited about.
Great. Final question. The existing farmers that are growing cannabis at the moment in your region, what would you like to see happen with them?
Well, why can we not start creating an industry with what we have? I was chatting to a lady on a different a conference, a webinar a week ago, and she highlighted that there had been trials that were done or were supposed to be done in the Eastern Cape back in the early 90s, late 90s. And there was some sort of an agreement between the police and the farmers, or that entity that would have been doing the trials, to actually work with the cannabis plant as it is, but to have some ways of verifying it with the police and saying this is what we have and this is the intention with it. So my feeling is that really we don't know how long the law is going to take to form and to start talking to us. So while we wait for all of that to happen, why can we not start producing, creating products out of the rest of the plant that is deemed legal?
So essentially, you guys just want to get on with it and make it happen.
Yeah, pretty much.
Right.
Pretty much.
Philasande, thank you so much for your time. It's been great to chat to you as always. We appreciate it. I think we are making great strides in this industry, even though there are challenges. So keep doing what you're doing, and thanks for being here.
Thank you. Thank you to you too and your group, Trenton. Thanks very much.
Guys, I want to invite the rest of you just to come into the room. If you just unmute your mics and put your cameras on. There we go. Right, so I'm just going to do a quick round of introductions. So Tony Budden is to my left or right? To my left, over there. Hi, Tony. Tony's the founding partner of the Hemporium, has been at the forefront of sort of the hemp push and revolution for over 25 years. So it's very well qualified to be on here. To his side, we have Thami Madliwa, who is the secretary of the Eastern Cape Hemp Producers Association. Thank you for joining us. Well, just next to her, we have Thabo Ramashala, who is the director of plant production at the Department of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development. Welcome, Thabo. And to his side, we have Clara, Norell, who is a founder and engineer at Swedish Hemp Industries. We're also expecting Ayanda to join us, which he should be on any minute now. But guys, thank you so much for joining us. This is a very, very hot topic at the moment. A lot of people are looking, we've got medicinal, which is slowly coming online. Recreational is kind of a bit all over the place, but a lot of people are looking at hemp and as an opportunity for small businesses, for entrepreneurs, to really also help bolster our economy. But I wanted to start just with a sort of overview of where things are at the moment. So, I was on a webinar last week, which unpacked kind of where licenses are at. So maybe, Thabo, if we could just get a quick update from you on where you think the licenses are at and what the next step is in the process.
All right, thank you, Trenton, and thank you to all the panelists, and welcome to everybody who has joined the webinar. My name is Thabo Ramashala. I'm from the Department of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development. Amongst other things, we are the people driving the development of the Cannabis Master Plan that has laid the foundation for the development of this new industry in South Africa. We know we are not new to Dagga, but in terms of formalizing the industry, we are seeing this as a new industry, which will now be coming into the open. So what has happened is that in 2019, Cabinet took a decision that South Africa needs to industrialize hemp and commercialize it in order to stimulate economic growth, in order to create jobs, and also to develop particularly rural areas where poverty is deep-rooted, and also to offer new opportunities to those people that wanted to enter this particular industry. What has happened is that we have developed the master plan, and in the master plan, we looked at cannabis in its entirety. We looked at Dagga, we looked at hemp, and then we're looking at commercializing all of them. And then in terms of commercialization, we're looking at 4 broad areas, which is medicinal. In terms of medicinal, it's where Dagga as well as hemp in terms of CBD come in the fray. And then the second area is industrial, where it is largely about hemp, where you use it for a variety of products, ranging from textiles right up to building materials and so on and so on. And then the third broad area, which we think will be a big winner for South Africa, is the food and the beverages component, where in the lessons from other countries indicated to us that if we handle it well, this could be a big winner. I know everybody is looking at medicinal. The medicinal industry, as we look at it, might be saturated quickly. That is both the domestic and the export market. But with food is eaten on a daily basis. And as the population grows, then the demand grows. So the food component will be a big winner. Then the last one is what Chairperson referred to, which is the recreational cannabis. In terms of recreational cannabis, there are a few policy decisions that still need to be taken. There are a few issues that South Africa needs really to take hard lessons on and take decisions to say, this is where we want to take the country to. Because what has happened is that there was a constitutional court judgment with regard to the recreational side of things. And then there was a judgment to say adult South Africans can be allowed to smoke dagga in their own spaces and even plant a few plants. And then that's why government then developed the bill, which is called the Cannabis for Private Purposes Bill. Now for hemp in particular, the discussions at the Interdepartmental Committee on Cannabis, that is where about 8 departments are meeting to guide the master plan development, decided to say the best home for hemp will be at the Department of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development. So what then happened is that we changed one of the regulations in that department and ensure that we provide for regulation for hemp. This is the reason why the minister in her budget speech in May announced that from October, the department will be issuing hemp permits. And that is where we are currently.
Great, thank you for that. So just leading perfectly. Firstly, Ayanda, bam, welcome. Thanks for joining us. Ayanda is the CEO and co-founder of BCubed Consulting and also the co-founder of Friends of Hemp South Africa. So thanks for joining us, Ayanda.
Thank you for having me.
I wanted to spend, because a lot of people are very interested in the whole licensing process. You know, when you're applying for a medicinal license, it's complex. It takes capital. Hemp has a very different kind of set of parameters. But I just wanted to highlight some of the things that on the session that we were on last week, that this is this is part of a section of the proposed framework. And one of the challenges I think that you guys have in this department is that because hemp can also be CBD, it falls between medicinal and between industrial. Tony, you've been at the forefront of this for many years, fighting for hemp legislation. What are some of the concerns that you have with the process at the moment? Or are there any? What from an industry perspective? What could we, what can we bring to the table that can help sort of smooth this process?
Okay, so one concern that I see coming up fast is obviously South Africa has fallen behind. We started this research, Thabo, correct me if I'm wrong, like 1995, 1994, around there, that the ARCs first started doing research. So it's the same. The Hemporium started in 96. That's a quarter of a century that we've fallen behind. And every year, last year around this time, Francina told me, don't worry, we'll be getting the permits this year and we'll be planting. You will be planting. And now we're running towards October again, where we've been told we might be able to apply. Planting season is October, November in this country. And I'm starting to get very worried we're going to miss another year of planting. If we can only start the application process in October, assessment, it hasn't been told how long that will take, approvals, when we'll get that. And then once we get our license, we still have to get seeds, which is now we're seeing is another whole story of where we're going to get registered seeds from. So I'm starting to really worry we're going to miss another whole season and then only look towards 2022 before we actually can get the industry going. So that's one of my questions for Thabo is like how long he sees that process as being from if the application permit forms get issued in October, we all fill them in, we all send them in. I'm sure they're going to probably be hundreds arriving in there, on your desk. How long do you foresee that process of assessment, approvals, maybe monitoring, inspections, that kind of thing? And is it realistic that we are going to be able to plant this year? Will there be seeds available? That process of going through plant protection takes time as well, and they also take about a month to give an answer on an import permit, and then you've still got to import, which these days with the COVID, to get any seeds from Europe to here is going to take probably another month. So that's the one big red light that I'm seeing around farmers who are preparing to plant this year and spending money on maybe fencing or preparing soil or not planting an alternative crop because they're expecting to plant hemp this year. And we need to be, I've had that on my shoulders many, many years in a row of farmers going, are we going to plant? Do I need to get fertilizer? Do I need to prepare my soil? Must I do this? And then having to be told, look, it's not happening this year. like perpetual imminence that we've been under, where every year we think it's coming and then we have to wait another year. So, that is the one question, a red flag, a red light that we picking up on. And then the other thing, and I know it's a very difficult situation for DALRA and for enforcement, but the fencing situation around hemp, it's a big problem for small farmers to put up a 2-meter high fence around what's an agricultural crop. To justify putting up a 2-meter high fence around a medical crop where you're going to be getting your dollars per gram, compared to justifying the expense of a hemp crop where you're getting 20, 30 rand a kilo of seeds, and maybe what do we pay per kilo of hemp herd? Also it's a couple of thousand rand per ton of hemp stalk. You're not going to pay that fence back for 3-4 years. And also you need obviously the capital to spend on that fence. And I've been all around the world to see hemp crops in China, India, Canada, UK, all over, and I've never seen a hemp fence beside one for keeping animals out and protecting, against a little bit of theft. But what we've experienced is, theft only happens once, and then the guys try and sell it as something that it's not on the black market. And quickly, if you're a dealer and you tell someone this is going to make you high and they smoke it and it doesn't, they're not going to be a dealer for very long, because those guys are going to come back and want their money back very quickly. So the fence does nothing but protect against diversion of something that, it's got no value of diversion. So I do understand our, like a lot of those countries I mentioned have law enforcement that are operational and inspections that are operational, and we don't have the manpower in the different departments to go and inspect every hemp crop, that people aren't going to be planting high THC instead of hemp. I do understand that may be a concern, but I think it's going to be a very prohibitive cost for a lot of people who want to get into this industry and deserve to get into this industry. So those are just two things I'd like to engage on at this time.
Thanks, Tony. So, Thabo, is there a fear from government that the industry will abuse these licenses and grow high THC when they're supposed to be growing low THC hemp? Is there a fear about that?
Chairperson, there is concerns that have been raised among us in government to say, when you open up this industry, there will always be those people that might take chances and use these licenses to grow high THC cannabis, which is dagga in this case. So there is that concern, and at the same time, there's also a need to open up the industry so that the industry can contribute to the economic growth in the country. So we're trying to balance this. But firstly, if I may start with this issue about anxiety, is that because the licenses for medical cannabis are so high. I mean, you need to put up 25,000 rand, and if you want to put up the facilities for production, then you need to have millions and millions of rand. Somebody was telling me about 30 million, which many people will not have access to. Even if you go to financial institutions, they will be very reluctant to borrow you this type of money. I mean, the other day I was having discussions with colleagues at the IDC, and then they were talking about these high costs, establishment costs for prospective cannabis growers. So there's that element. And then now when the entry into medical cannabis are this high, and you open up an opportunity for hemp, which the licenses will be far less, we will only charge money to cover the cost for administering this particular function. The licenses will be very reasonable. And then now, as such, there will be people who like to jump into the bandwagon. And then unfortunately, those people will be spoiling it out for everybody else, because government will then need to intervene in cases where people were given licenses for hemp and then they grow something else instead. So there's that. But we believe that despite all of this, we need to start in South Africa. Let's get this industry going. Despite the teething problems that will be there, and then use those licenses, the lessons learned, and try to perfect the systems going forward. So for starters, the issue of the planting season, yes, we know. October is an important month for hemp growers. If October and November passes by, they are likely to have missed the season. So, but the fact of the matter is there were a lot of issues that need to be resolved on the regulatory front. I have explained on many platforms to say we have restrictions in terms of the Medicinal and Medicinal Products Act, as well as the Drugs Act, particularly the Drugs Act, which still classifies hemp as a prohibited substance. So then now there was that one, and then, but complicating it further, there was another Constitutional Court judgment last year, which challenged the powers of the minister in terms of changing the Drugs Act. Then that delays government, because had it not been that, we will for now be saying South Africa is issuing licenses for hemp, and the people can freely participate in this industry. So for now, there was that delay, and we will have opened up the application process earlier, but there are still these final touches that we need to do before we start with the process in October. We know there will be those farmers that might have access to seed from whatever source that might be ready to start, but there may be those that need to source this seed from elsewhere in the world, and that might take time. But in terms of the whole process of processing applications, right from when you launch the application until itself, we have a turnaround time of 2 months that we have set for ourselves. It can be less as we go on, but for now, 2 months we think is reasonable. And then we would like to say to South Africa, we will commit to 2 months to ensure that when you launch your application in 2 months' time, you might have an answer of whether you have succeeded in getting the permit or not. The issue of fencing, yes. We have, right from the word go, had raised concerns about how many farmers will afford a 2-meter high fence around their field. Even if it's a 2-hectare field, 2-meter high fence is very expensive. More so if somebody is going to plant 10 hectares, that will be massive in terms of the cost. So the issue of fencing is receiving attention. There will be some fencing required, particularly to keep out animals and also people, because again, we must restrict access to this field, particularly by vulnerable members of the community like the children and the young people. So there will be fencing needed, but it will not be 2-meter high fence. And but for starters, because like we say, as South Africa, we're moving into this new terrain, there will be a lot of issues that will arise. There may be a number of teething problems that will come about, but we are committed to resolving them as much as possible and then ensure that we can pave the way for the industry without putting a lot of red tapes in it. So for ourselves, we want to be clear to say we want this industry to get off the ground, producing and getting functional, and then again start employing people and also contributing to the economy of this country. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Thabo. I think it's really thank you for articulating the sort of government position on this. I think it is complex. I mean, I can sense already from some of the participants that there's certainly a level of frustration because we desperately need other sort of sectors to come online to bolster our economy. But at the same time, we do understand that there are complexities and that the government has lots of different arms that need to come together. So we are appreciative of your time and that explanation. I don't want to sort of get into a situation where we're getting too negative about this. It is a step forward. We would just like to say from an industry perspective, please, anything we can do to support the speeding up of this process, where we're here to help. We need this industry to come online as soon as possible. I just wanted to get some input from Thami. I mean, you head up the Eastern Cape Hemp Producers Association, which at the moment is something, I guess, on paper. But how do you feel about the timing? Is that frustrating for you? I mean, what are your thoughts?
Thank you, Trenton, for the opportunity. Yes, it is frustrating, as Tony has said, because we've already been having permits and then we have been planting. Now we don't know what will be the situation. And in my case, we already engaged with other processors to say, when we have a produce, please make it a point that you use it to process and give us a sample of what you have done. Now it will be breaking if we are not planting this year. And I so wish that the department could focus or maybe consider prioritizing those who have permits. Then the delay be maybe to the new entrants, to the ones that are going to be planning for the first time, but making a room for those who have been there. It is really frustrating because it has been so many years us being on the research and development process, and then we were starting to say things are going smoothly and are going forward. And the move from SAPRA to the department was a good thing to us to say we are out of the Schedule 7, so we're going to be free to plant. But we didn't expect that it is going to be delayed as it has been done. I understand and hear what Mr. Ramashala is saying, but I so wish that they could be on our shoes and see the delays that are going to frustrate us more. And maybe they are going to frustrate, and then people will start doing things the wrong way.
Great, thanks for that input. I think maybe that's something, a takeaway, look at the existing permits that are out there and maybe deal with those in a different way to the new permits. I want to take a slightly different angle on this. Clara, just give us, unpack quickly how your industry came online in this space. You're in Sweden.
Yes, I'm currently in Sweden, unfortunately. I'm not in South Africa. Thank you so much for inviting me to this webinar. I'm very honored and pleased to be amongst you all. I came to South Africa first time 2003 to study civil engineering at CPUT, Cape Peninsula University of Technology. And after 2 weeks, I was invited by a dear friend of mine. I believe he's watching the webinar, Thabo Shumba, invited me to Guguletu. And the first thing I think Tony or you, Trenton, said when you came on was that you were cold. That it's cold in South Africa. And it was very cold also for me in the ghetto, in the townships, and the buildings and the lack of basic needs and the RDP housing. So I was introduced to all of that in 2003. And as an engineer, a construction engineer, I started to do research on what building materials could you use instead of the conventional RDP housing. Yes.
Clara, sorry to interrupt you there. We're going to get onto that in a second. I just wanted some insight into sort of how you guys have brought on permits within your territory.
Yes.
And then we'll go into that.
Okay. Yes. Sorry. Thank you. I just wanted to I'm thinking maybe people are wondering why is Swedish hemp industry in a South African webinar. So in any case, I'm in Sweden now. And as I am dedicated to work with hemp, I do it now in Sweden. And what we have here is we all go under the EU laws and registrations. So we have to follow the EU laws. And then we have the Department of Agriculture. And then when you want to grow hemp, industrial hemp, you go to the Department of Agriculture and there is a list of the seeds that are allowed to grow. We are growing then EU certified seeds. I hope that South Africa will put a lot of research into developing your own local hemp strains as well, and of course also to do research with European and other seeds. But then that's what we do. We apply to the Department of Agriculture and say, okay, I'm going to grow hemp, and then we have to map out where are we going to grow it and how much kilo hemp per hectare, or how much you want to grow. And then you will also get beneficiaries for growing per hectare. And I also hope that that is something that can be coming to South Africa.
When you say beneficiaries, can you just expand on that?
Yeah, so it's like a farmer's subsidization. So we get like 2,200 Swedish krona per hectare, which is around maybe 4,500 rand. I don't know exactly the value today, but then everybody who is a farmer gets this support also to grow, and then we are allowed to grow. And this is my 3rd year growing, and we haven't had any like police or anybody coming. We do not put up fence, and I understand the situation, but I get a little bit confused when there has to be a fence for children, because this is an agricultural and industrial crop. It's like growing corn, maize, wheat, rye, whatever. Like this is an agricultural crop. So it's not dangerous for anybody to be close to it. So yeah, we have to grow and we have to educate a lot also. There was one family that got their whole small scale farmers to the police kicked down all of their plants because of not knowledge. So I think it's really good what you're doing, Sheba Africa Academy, that you're having platforms like this, because education is needed. This is an agricultural crop, and I'm so pleased to hear Mr. Thabo talking about the food security and the food sovereignty, because this is really what it is. And the Barclay Institute have said that within 10 years' time, the meat substitute is going to take 10% of the meat industry. This is a lot of money, and it's also, of course, good for a country like South Africa, who has a lot of people to feed, to really look into this. Yeah.
Great, thanks. I want to get onto all the products and stuff in a second, but Ayanda, sorry, we haven't heard from you yet. I want to move on from the licensing, but could you just quickly input? You've traveled a lot and worked in many countries around the world. What do you think are some of the things that would grease the wheels and help, Thabo with what he's doing from an industry perspective? Self-regulation is something that's important. Often as an industry, we find people not regulating themselves. What do we have to do as an industry to be responsible to make Thabo's job easier?
Good question, Trenton. I mean, I think I'm perhaps slightly more pessimistic than some of the other panelists, because as far as I'm concerned, even with the issuing of permits, whether it's October or December, there isn't really much of a viable industry just because of the way that the regulations sit at the moment. So it's really unfortunate that I think Dr. Ramashala and his team have inherited a sector that is in effect a non-starter on 2 accounts. One of them is around the definition of hemp based on a THC threshold that has no scientific basis. There is a lot of learning when it comes to a number of other jurisdictions around what, the enforceability of a 0.2% threshold, where I think most of where everyone is leading is towards 1%. I think we need to be looking to test the industry and go, but there is certainly no reason why we can't learn from other jurisdictions. So the 1% THC is really what we're coalescing around. And for the actual viability of the production in South Africa, I mean, you really can't keep to 0.2%. So it's a big hindrance. But the other really big one is, I think for us, we hear a lot about the focus on food and beverages, but actually the Schedule 6 amendment to the Medicines Act specifically restricts applications for human and animal ingestion, which in effect would completely for marketing in that area of food and beverages. And beyond that, I think, Tony, in a previous session, I'd asked you around sort of the standards on residues of cannabinoids in foods. We don't even have that. So the challenge is that even if you do kickstart the industry now, what you have as far as the regulations allow is really only a market for fiber-based, so growing for straw. And as far as we know, there's only a single decorticator in the entire country that would actually enable the processing of that. And even that input capacity for it is very small. So I think there are a number of restrictions here. Some of the big learnings, and I think the biggest one really, one for viability in terms of the farmer, but also in terms of the viability of the whole industry, is really this idea around whole plant industrialization. The only way that you actually liberalize hemp and you provide farmers to be able to make a diversified income base is from allowing them to use the entire plant for feeds, for food, for fibers, and for fractions. At the moment, our legislation doesn't allow us to use the flowers, the seeds, the leaves, in effect, the roots either. So those are some of the challenges that we're seeing in a number of areas. If we don't actually unlock those spaces, we're going to have a couple of challenges. Now, I think some of the other panelists have spoken about other matters, but I think two are particularly important. One, we live in a country that has a severely constrained fiscus, and it's really difficult for private financial institutions to intermediate finance for operators that work in a sector that is defined as a narcotic. So I'm just curious around how the government is thinking around how any of these various activities are going to be funded if the private sector is not really able to participate. The Drugs Act, and the whole plant criminalization being one of the fundamental stumbling blocks there. But the other one that's very South Africa specific, Trenton, is really around thinking about the protection of indigenous knowledge systems. We haven't heard anything yet from Dalrod around how they're going to protect, for example, the almost 1 million farmers that have developed really important land-race genetics in this country. A lot of them are very high THC based. And we're hearing about people looking to go and grow large plantations of hemp in the Bundeland region, which is something that is also of great concern to us. So these are some of the things that I think we can kind of learn from a number of places, but also look to kind of ensure that the industry that we're looking to build is also one that's very specific to the South African context, rather than simply sort of imposing whatever we might find as, best practice from somewhere else. So I think these are some of the areas, and I'm not going to go on for too long, but those are some of my initial thoughts in addition to what some of the other panel members have shared.
Thanks, Ayanda. I appreciate that input. Some very valid points there. I'm not going to go into the whole sort of grand scheme of what government should be doing, because I don't want to put Thabo on the spot, and it sits within different departments. It's not just the agricultural side that he's on. But these are valid points and very valid to bring up. And I'm sure Thabo can take those back to his team and unpack some of those. I want to shift the conversation a bit, because there are a lot of sort of entrepreneurs on this call. There are sort of small businesses that are thinking like, right, so okay, we might have some delays on growing this year, but essentially, what is the opportunity? So, I mean, Tony, this is something you talk about all the time. Let's just quickly unpack what the hemp opportunity is in terms of products and what people can do. We talk about industrializing, and often people think of that on a massive scale, but there is an opportunity to create large amounts of products, etc. So we'll talk to you, and then I want to pop over to Clara, because I know she's very involved in sort of RDP housing, etc. And then we'll move from there. So maybe just quickly talk about some of the opportunities that there are once all of this legislation stuff has been dealt with.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, for South Africa, and again, we know that the more refined product, like textiles, for instance, need a big value chain. They have expensive decorticators, and then you've still got to take that fiber and get it cottonized and then turned into your textiles. It's going to take quite a while before we've developed, first of all, the right varieties and I do know that you can get fiber off every cannabis plant, but not long fibers that are good for going into textiles. There's certain varieties that give you long fibers up to 30 centimeters long, and majority of the plants that grow like a bush, like the plants that are generally used for recreation or medicinal use, are short fiber plants because they're not suitable for making textiles. So we would that value chain will take a couple of years probably to develop, to find the right varieties, to do the testing, to make sure that we can justify spending the many millions of rands that we'll need to set up a textile processing facility. But that can happen, like it must happen, but it's going to take years. So we need to focus really on the easier to process stuff, like to do the building industry. We need a hammer mill and a filtering system to get most of the fiber off the herd, to clean the herd and separate it. That can be done cheaply and can be done on a small scale. We're doing it in Malawi with a Chinese porticator that's basically rollers that crush the stalk, give you that rough fiber, but that can go into insulation. Yeah, exactly. Something like what's on the right there. And that can be developed easy in South Africa. But you're not going to get your textile grade fibers out of that, but you can get rough fibers that will go into insulation, maybe into paper, which again is a big need. We need to stop cutting down our trees and then stop planting pine in our areas where our rainfall, where we need the water to go for human use and agriculture. That there's the construction side, unending need for good houses in South Africa. Then food as well. Like obviously one of our big concerns then is keep, with making seeds, you're going to get a lot of male, you're going to get a lot of pollen. So the cross-pollination is an issue. Keep, the making food crops into areas that are far away from the traditional growing areas. Areas probably like Free State. There's a lot of you need about a 20-kilometer barrier. But there you just need oil presses and dehuller, a very small machine that can separate the shell from the seed. And again, nutrition in this country, and especially omega fatty acid rich nutrition, which helps brains grow, which helps people learn, which keeps immune system strong. There's not a lot of raw seeds and nuts and oils going in the local diet. So, that's a massive market. And then the oil feeds into the cosmetic industry as well, which can be done at a small level. Like make these cosmetics, these soaps, on a craft level. So these are the small industries that can grow. And as these companies grow, as they develop, as they build markets, then move towards more mainstream where the standards have to come in. And if you're selling into the spas or the discounts, they're going to have standards that you have to adhere to. But to get to that, it usually takes a few years of learning and doing it on a craft level. So there is space for both in this industry. And that's one of the beauties of this industry is you can have like top end stuff going into Levi's at the same time as having people making handmade textiles like the Indians do on very small looms. It's rougher. It's not going to be really to wear, but you can do homeware with it. You can do carpets, that kind of thing. So it's really choosing the products that have the least amount of investment needed for the value chains. And that for me is the food side and then the building construction side, and the rest will come down the line. I just want to make one point on that fiber because I get this a lot. Everyone goes, but we can just grow, bondo for fiber. It's not. I'm in contact with a company in the States that set up a whole textile mill and decorticator, thinking that they were going to buy all the branches and the stalks from the CBD farms and from the THC farms in the States. And they got short fiber. It wasn't good for making textiles, and the company is now changed completely to supplying a whole nother market. So with the textile industry, we have to just be aware that it's the right cultivars. SA Hemp 1, SA Hemp 2 are good fiber cultivars. So but they don't give you much biomass. They don't give you much flower production or much seed. They're very, very good fiber varieties. So we have a good head start there, but we can't not look at the other byproducts that would come from more bulky varieties. And then just one point, I know it's a contentious point, but Thabo, you will have to try and fly this flag. Our hemp farmers need to be able to access the cannabinoids in their flowers. They can't plow that back into the earth, or not be able to at least sell it to a licensed manufacturer who can turn it into a medicine. But it's such a valuable part of the crop, and our farmers will be at a huge disadvantage if they can't access CBD, CBG, TBN, your other cannabinoids, even the trace amounts of THC, that can go to a market. Yeah, we can't disadvantage our farmers and say you can only work with seeds and fiber. It's like the whole US and EU CBD market is from hemp-derived CBD. And here, SAPRA is trying to tell us if you want to work with cannabinoids, you need a Section 22C license, which is, again, a barrier to entry, and it's incredibly exclusive. So we need to be able to work with cannabinoids as hemp farmers as well.
Great, thanks for that, Tony. And just for those of you looking, this is actually Tony's house made out of hemp. So you are certainly the hemp man. Thami, you guys focus on the ground on growing hemp. What is the level of education like with the farmers in terms of them understanding what the end product is for hemp? Do they understand that it could be used in lots of different formats? Is there any interest or conversation around how they can move from growing also into processing? Well, what's the sort of general consensus on the ground?
If I can go back and give you a brief background of what we did, it was fortunate that at the very beginning of the planting, some form of processing was introduced, and with each and every hemp pilot site, there was an SMME. Those SMMEs, they were in the processing, either doing craft or making garments out of the produce that was coming from us as farmers. There was, I don't know whether it still exists, but there was a plant that was bought and placed at CSIR in Gqeberha, where the processing of the fiber was. And it went to as far as mixing hemp with other fibers, including silks, and that made us to stretch the SMMEs that we had, and even have SMMEs in Limpopo because of the silk, because it was coming from there. We were introduced to that, and lucky enough, there were so many expos and symposiums that I remember when I met Tony, it was in Bethesda. It was one of those expos where we were exposed to what hemp can done. And in there, we learned that there are some indoor panels that were done by a company abroad for Mercedes-Benz. And we wanted that to happen with us. That exposure was there at the very beginning. And if you can see behind me, I've got Umpa, got there in the small bag that came from those SMMEs that were there even then. And again, we were so lucky so fortunate that out of the Compolti, which was actually a fiber plant, and it was doing well. It did well, such that we even had a chance of harvesting the seed. And that seed was so beautiful, and we managed to press it. We do have oil pressers sitting at Doni. We pressed the oil, and I think I remember we got something like 5 liters, if I'm not mistaken, and we sold the oil at 200 rand then per liter. And the demand was there, and it is still there. It is very much unfortunate that where the research was only focusing on fiber. And at that time already, it was known and seen that the textile industry is not doing well in South Africa. And we had 2 major textile companies that closed down in East London area, that moved to, one moved to KwaZulu-Natal and the other one moved to King Williamstown because of them not doing so well. So we knew before the end of the process that the fiber is not the way to go. We need to look for something else. And the interest was there to say, let us build our own houses, because the houses that we were building, they are so expensive and are not as comfortable as the houses that are made of hemp. And lucky enough, I visited Tony. I know how the house there feels, and it was good of me to be in that house. Those are the things that we wanted. And when we are looking at the disasters that are happening around us, the floods, the wind blowing houses, and the poor of the low-cost houses, you feel that it would be better if we are using hemp for the building of houses. Because even if that house is not built well by the constructor, if it happens to fall, it won't kill anybody inside, but it will be some bruises and scratches, and that person will be still alive. So that exposure made us to be more interested, especially the people who are like myself, who are anti-marijuana. When we get to know the beauty and the products that are coming from hemp, we were so much interested and wanted to have it. It is really a situation of us, being able to have a better price for the seed, because it is going to take time for our country to have the oil seed, the hemp oil seed cultivars, and other foods. It will be only, it will take quite a number of years, but I don't say we need to wait for that before we can move, because the demand is now and the need is today. So we really need to look at what most of the things Tony has said, not forgetting to touch more and seriously on all the points that were put by Ayanda, to say let our legislation be friendly for us to work. If you go to these chemists or whatever stores, you'll find that there are so many foreign products that are there. And again, I so wish that the new permit will not have some restrictions as to say you grow for fiber, you grow for this. As farmers, we are supposed to use everything that comes from the plant. When you are saying that you grow for this in the permit, you are limiting the farmer and taking what needs to come to the farmer. If the roots have something that is good, that can help somewhere, let the farmers use from the roots to the top part of the plant and benefit from it.
Thank you for that, Thami. It's really good to hear that there is on the ground interest and capacity and at some level to create products. It means that we have this fledgling industry ready to be turned on. Guys, we're kind of running out of time. I would like to extend this by 15 minutes if everybody's okay with that. Is that okay? Because I'd like to get Clara's opinion on kind of building. I'd like to get Thabo's opinion on has there been any government discussion about how we industrialize in terms of the processing side? Is there dialogue around that? And then Ayanda, I've got a few questions for you because I know you haven't had much opportunity to speak. This is a very deep and interesting topic. Before we continue though, we are about to launch a hemp course actually. So we are giving one away, and we have a winner. Boitumelo Machaba has won the hemp course. So congratulations to Boitumelo. So we'll be in touch after the course. I think that's one thing that's super important is we really need to educate ourselves on this plant. I mean, people like Tony and Clara and everyone here that really we understand it's a deep industry. Clara, let's talk about sort of continue on the housing situation. RDP housing is something that comes up constantly. You're an engineer. You're very involved in the building space. How complicated is it to bring on a building industry using hemp in South Africa, based on your experience there and based on your experience of living here?
Yes, thank you so much for asking. So I'm also a certified hemp lime builder, certified by l'École Nationale du Chanvre, which is the French National Hemp Building School. They are also certified by the French state to build. And in France, they have been building with hemp houses for the last 20 or 30 years because it has never been illegal there. So in France, we have high rises with hempcrete buildings. I think we lost Thabo, but I'm just going to continue.
When you say high rise, how many floors?
14.
Okay.
So that's like hotels and office buildings. That's in France. In Sweden, it's we have a very conservative building industry here. So it's different than in other countries. There are some 4 major operators here. So it's it's you know, it's a uphill coming with a new material. But if I look at South Africa, who has a unique, it's unique with the RDP houses. It's unique that the government is funding build houses as a kind of subsidy for people. So the way I see it, it would be great if there could be some public-private partnership, because as Tony said, the textile industry is going to cost a lot of money. The building industry is also going to cost a lot of money in terms of the decorticator, and if we're going to go scaling, and if we're going to go through the NHBRC stamps, if you're going to build with RDP houses, you have to have a certain stamp to be approved to build these houses. So then it needs to be certified. And I think that we can just look at the French guys and get inspired by them. But I just want to show here, I brought some. So this is the chives, the herds. They are not as clean because they need to be, the dust needs to be below 4% in this. This is the fiber. As you can see, there is a little bit of herds in it. That's because it's been separated by a hammer mill. So it needs something better if you're going to build with it. And the reason why it needs to be maximum 4% dust in this is because the chemical reaction between the lime and the water is important. So you can't just go and use whatever lime you have. You need to use lime that has been researched for hemp to be built with hemp. And then you have hemp, lime, and water. And when you build with hemp, lime, and water, it's the herds. And this can also be used as animal bedding. This can be used as when you growing. And I also want to add to the products that you can use. It's for biochar, bioplastics, I've forgotten your name. I'm so sorry. Thami. Thami. You were speaking about the cars, the car industry. The car industry is 10% of South Africa's GDP. So there is a lot of cars being manufactured in South Africa. This is a great opportunity for South Africa, because if we are looking at the low-hanging fruits, then we should look at geotextiles. So it's you can make geotextiles out of this fiber, the short fiber that Tony was talking about, that you can't really make clothes of it, but you can make geotextiles and also bioplastic. And you can make thermo insulation for buildings. You can make biochar. You can make also, we have a company buying their growing microgreens on it. So you use it instead of earth to grow in. But I'm mainly growing for food. So I'm mainly harvesting the seeds to sell in bulk to the food industry. And then this is the residual waste from the industrial production stream. So I agree with everybody here that has said the full plant. To apply for a license for primary production and one for manufacturing and one, I think that if we are looking at South Africa's small scale farmers and business opportunities, it needs to be one license for the industrial hemp, and then the farmer or whoever is the buyer needs to decide what are they going to focus on, because you can't harvest everything in one plant. You have to choose. Maybe you harvest seeds and fiber, or leaves and fiber. But at least there's a lot of money, and it's a circular economy that can be built. And South Africa as a whole could be able to reach Agenda 2030, the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, and the ESGs that South Africa is already working with. They're talking about circular economy, biotech, green tech, and so on. So this is, I mean, it's such a great opportunity, and I really, really hope that there will be opportunity to apply for license before October. Because as Tony said, it needs to be happening now. So that
great. Thanks for that, Clara.
Thank you,
Thabo. I know you are there. Can you hear us? I'm really interested to know. We obviously need infrastructure. And yes, we can have small decortication machines, but we need stuff on an industrial level. Just Thabo, can you hear us? We'll Thabo?
Yes,
Hi.
I can hear you. Sorry, there was
we obviously need,
seems to be a problem.
Thanks for coming back.
But I can hear you now.
Yeah, so we obviously, to putting the sort of the farmers and the licensing, everything aside, to bring this industry online properly is going to take considerable investment. International investment, local investment. Is there discussion within your department or within government in general about how we can build this infrastructure?
Yeah, Trenton, the master plan has devoted a section around building the much needed infrastructure. Particularly, there is a pillar on manufacturing, and then which also dictate that we need to have specific infrastructure to support manufacturing as well as processing. So there's that discussion. The issue has been how to ensure that you create space for both government and private sector to play their role in that regard. But there is a pillar around manufacturing and processing that will guide us around that particular piece. Because without that, we can't industrialize this particular commodity. So there's that discussion.
Yeah, I guess it's a chicken and egg. It's kind of we need.
Yeah,
we need
if I remember well, the pillar around processing and manufacturing is led by the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition, together with Science and Innovation as well as Small Business Development. So there's that pillar looking at that one. Yes.
Okay, well that's good to know. Yes. I think it's difficult because there are a lot of people who want to invest in the industry, but until the legislation settles down, they're sort of standing in the wings.
Yeah,
I'm very confident that once that legislation moves forward, there'll be large amounts of local and international investment to boost things. Thanks for that input.
That's why we want to get this industry going, so that we can try to unlock many of these problems that are difficult for investors to come in. Did you lose me again? Hello?
Yeah, no, we got most
I can
of that.
see you, but can you hear me?
We can hear you, yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Right, no thanks. Yeah.
Great, thank you for that, Thabo. Appreciate
what I was saying is that, thank you.
Good.
Just continue.
Sorry. I was just going to say, from my side, the Deputy Minister of Trade and Industry was at Hemporium about a month ago to come and see all the products, feel them, touch them, get an idea of the scale of the industry. And they are looking at it at the highest level. So hopefully DTI will come to the party with processing facilities and understanding what is needed to really make sure this industry reaches that full potential.
That's great news, Tony. Ayanda, your vision for the hemp future, what do you think are the first entry points in terms of bringing this online, licensing aside, and where do you think we can take this to?
Lots of opportunities, and I think on the first place to think about in South Africa is there is quite a large amount of hemp demand and usage. I think it's very interesting to think about where.
Yes.
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I think the opportunity is first and foremost in the import substitution. So I think for example, entry points like the automotive industry that already use hemp-based composites, right, for applications in the automotive industry. That's something that already exists, and you have companies that are based in the Eastern Cape that actually import these and then do the assembly locally. So I think where we might want to be able to identify where those niche opportunities might lie for us is to see where the demand already lies and then looking at opportunities for being able to localize some of those production systems and processes. In terms of our vision for hemp industry, certainly one that at its core benefits a smallholder farmer who's sitting somewhere in a rural space and is looking for the opportunity to be able to engage in this industry and to be able to participate with the support of enabling structures. So, for example, I think the master plan is a really great effort to kind of move things forward, but we don't really have any focus yet on sort of how we commercialize the industry. So I'd like to be able to see something where we have very clear parameters in place around how we're going to avoid establishing the kind of market concentration that characterizes much of the South African economy. So how do we actually make sure that this is an industry that works for the average person? We have a particularly unique opportunity in that we don't have an already entrenched industry. We're pretty much starting from scratch. And so we can avoid some of the mistakes, right, that we've made in other areas. I think there are huge opportunities on the food and beverages side. I think the challenge that I mentioned with SAPRA and the restrictions on that side, I think if those were actually released, you would be able to have a huge contribution, one on the nutrition side, but also when you think about the protein source for most of the feedstock, right, that comes from like intensively farmed soybeans, for example, with highly fluctuating prices, you can actually replace that protein source, which is what 70% of your operating cost as a farmer, by substituting with hemp, for example, that has a ton of protein as well. So I see those opportunities there, but I think the single biggest one, and this is where we start thinking about how you get large-scale numbers of farmers involved, is in two areas. So I think I certainly do agree that if you're talking about the textiles industry, we have to make a distinction. So there's woven textiles, which is for clothing and apparel. There are non-woven textiles where you actually don't need the long staple lengths on the fibers. You can actually use the really short staple length ones, and particularly in an industry where we all want to be able to grow, but actually the training and the education for how to do that best is actually also not established. So I think this is something I've mentioned repeatedly, that institutions like Chiba, alongside the public extension system, are really important for making sure that we have an adequately trained workforce. We have an example in South Africa where we made a major investment. We weren't able to properly ret some of the fiber-based stocks, and it made the processing quite a bit of a nightmare. And there were quite a number of repeated failures in that area. So I think the education bit is really, really huge, and it's something that we certainly can get started on in preparation for an industry that works for all. Finally, we need to be able to get financing, and we need to be able to open up those channels, because otherwise the industry cannot start. It would be very interesting to hear at some point from the DTIC how they are thinking about something like a sector support strategy, which they typically have for a number of their other priority industries. So how are they going to create different kinds of incentives? How are we going to encourage FDI? How are we going to ensure that local financiers are able to participate? But fundamentally for us, if this industry, especially on the hemp side, because medicinally, we've pretty much lost the opportunity, I think, for the average South African citizen to participate. The recreational side is also a little bit of an uphill climb. The biggest opportunity lies in hemp. And if this can't work for the average citizen, then it's not really an industry that we're happy to support. I think that needs to be the core focus of this. So I see an industry in a couple of years, if we're able to actually get a number of these elements right, being a major force of industrialization, just simply because of the economic complexity of the crop, the multiplier effect that you can get. You could see large scale employment in this area, large opportunities for incredible R&D, which is another area that requires quite a bit of support. And I think it's quite nice to be able to talk about sort of some of the products that have been mentioned here. But there's actually quite a lot of interesting research that is happening, even in South Africa, in areas that aren't maybe not necessarily as exciting. You know, for example, the application of hemp in bioremediating degraded mining lands, or folks who are looking at the extraction of nanocrystalline cellulose, right, which allows you also to sort of fractionate both hemp and other products as well. And chemical cellulose has a massive, massive market. But there are many hidden opportunities that aren't immediately seen, because I don't think that we've done enough work to actually understand, well, where are the real opportunities for us? Do we have actually the ability or the capability to be able to exploit those? But I think the opportunities are certainly large and are bound, as long as we're able to be quite deliberate right at the onset around how we establish them.
Yeah, thanks for that. Some really good insight there. I feel like we could go on all day, so we have run out of time. I'd like to apologize for all of those people who've asked questions. We've had loads of questions coming in, but there's been so much content to get through. We just haven't had a chance to get to those. The recording of this will be up in the next few days. Guys, I'd like to really sincerely thank you for being here. I know Thabo's video has gone off, but I can still see him in the room, so I'm assuming he's still around. It is an exciting, frustrating, time for all of us. But I think the general consensus is, from an industry and government perspective, we all want the same thing. We all want to bring this online. And I think the steps that are happening within government are very positive. I think we do need a bit more sort of speed in that. I think that's a general consensus. So, I guess from an industry perspective, we are there to engage and support and work with government to make sure we can bring this industry online to the benefit of all of us and our people. And I think, Ayanda, what you said about making sure that this particular segment of the industry is accessible to the man on the street is super important. So thank you so much. I'm really looking forward to this industry coming online. Thabo, please do whatever you can to speed these processing up and the licenses. We would really appreciate it. And we do appreciate everything you guys are doing for the industry, and we're super excited for the next phase of its growth. Thank you so much, guys. Have an awesome day, and we really appreciate your time. Have a great day.
Thank you.